History is not a straight line. In our world, it's a jagged scar. We reached for the stars in Rome only to spend 1,000 years kneeling in the dirt of the Dark Ages. We didn't just lose our technology, we lost our momentum. But theory number 3 asks, what if the lights never went out? What if the Great Library wasn't a victim of history, but a fortress against it? Imagine a world where the Middle Ages never happened. Where the plague was met with germ theory instead of superstition, where the Roman economy didn't collapse but evolved into a global industrial powerhouse. In this timeline, we didn't have to wait for the Renaissance to rediscover the truth. We already had it, and we never let it go. This is the continuous timeline, the story of how one library turned humanity into an unbreakable species. This is how we skip the dark. This theory is the grand synthesis. While the first 2 theories focus on how we would have progressed, Theory 3 explores why the collapse of civilization, the 1,000-year Dark Ages, would have been mathematically and socially impossible in the Alexandria survives timeline. In our history, the Dark Ages were caused by the loss of centralized knowledge, the death of the middle class, and the retreat of science into isolated monasteries. In this timeline, the library acts as a civilization-level hard drive that can't be wiped. The death of information scarcity in our timeline, knowledge was a luxury. A single fire, a single damp cellar, or a single invading army could, and often did, erase centuries of human progress. In the Alexandria survives timeline, the 1st century marks the end of fragile knowledge and the birth of information immortality. Here is how the library would have killed the concept of information scarcity. 1. The Alexandrian printing press, the scriptorium upgrade. The library already employed hundreds of scribes to copy scrolls by hand. In this timeline, the mechanical curiosity of the library theory 1 meets the massive demand for books. The innovation, by 80 AD instead of hand copying, the library develops movable bronze type. Borrowing from the precision of coin minting and the pressure mechanisms of wine presses, they create the first high-volume printing house. The result, the cost of a book, codex, drops by 90%. Knowledge is no longer locked in a single room, it is distributed by the thousands. 2. The mirror library's decentralized storage. The library's greatest weakness was its centralization. In the surviving timeline, the Roman Egyptian state realizes that information is its most valuable asset. The strategy, every major city, Rome, Londinium, Carthage, and Antioch, establishes a mirror library. Every new discovery made in Alexandria is printed and shipped across the empire. The result, information becomes a distributed network. Even if Alexandria were to be sacked or burned, 99% of its data exists in a dozen other cities. You can't kill an idea if it's everywhere at once. 3. The standardized pocket codex. In our timeline, literacy was for the 1%. In this timeline, the abundance of paper mass-produced from Egyptian papyrus or early linen fiber paper changes the social structure. The literacy hook, every Roman soldier and engineer is issued a pocket codex, a durable printed manual containing standardized maps, medical first aid, and engineering tables. The result, literacy becomes a survival skill. When everyone from the general to the blacksmith has the same data set, the Dark Ages become impossible because the average person is too educated to let society collapse. For the end of lost discoveries, we spent centuries rediscovering things the ancients already knew, like the circulation of blood or the distance to the sun. The scientific archive, the library, creates the first peer review system. Observations are recorded, cross-referenced with calculus theory 2, and archived. The result, science becomes additive, not repetitive. Every generation builds directly on top of the last without having to reinvent the wheel every 300 years. 5. The preservation of the common tongue. The Dark Ages were partially caused by the fragmentation of Latin into various local Romance languages, making communication impossible. The language anchor, because everyone is reading the same printed Alexandrian standard, Greek or Latin, the language remains stable for 1,000 years. The result, a scientist in the year 800 AD can read a scroll from 100 AD as easily as a modern person reads a newspaper. There is no translation gap to hide the secrets of the past. The final result of information abundance by 300 AD, the death of information scarcity, has created a civilization that is hardened against catastrophe. In our world, the lights went out because we lost the instructions on how to keep them on. In this world, the instructions are in everyone's pocket. 2. The economic fortress. In our history, the Roman Empire was an extraction economy. It relied on conquering new lands to pay for its old ones. When the conquest stopped, the money ran out, the roads crumbled, and the Dark Ages began. In the Alexandria Survives timeline, Section 2 is about the transition to a production economy. By 200 AD, the empire isn't just a political union, it is a high-speed integrated economic fortress that is physically impossible to dismantle. 1. The iron and steam infrastructure. Historically, Roman trade moved at the speed of a mule or a favorable wind. The theory, with the steam age theory 1 in full swing, the empire invests in the iron way. The reality, by 150 AD, the famous Roman roads are being retrofitted with iron rails. Steam-powered traction engines pull massive loads of grain, ore, and coal across continents. The economic result, this kills the distance tax. In our timeline, it was too expensive to ship grain from Egypt to Britain. In this timeline, the empire is a single market. If one province has a bad harvest, the rail system moves a surplus from another province in days, not months. 2. The death of slave labor. The biggest economic trap of Rome was slavery. It made labor cheap, which meant nobody bothered to invent machines. The shift, in the Alexandria timeline, the efficiency of a high-pressure steam engine, phase 3 of theory 1, makes human muscle obsolete. The reality, a single engine does the work of 500 slaves for the cost of a few tons of coal. The economic result, slavery becomes a liability rather than an asset. The empire transitions into a waged labor economy. This creates a massive middle class of consumers, people who have money to buy the mass-produced goods coming out of the Alexandrian factories. 3. The standardized global trade. Before the library's influence, every region had its own weights, measures, and currency purity. The theory, using calculus-based precision theory 2, the library establishes the imperial metric. The reality, every gear, every screw, and every brick in the empire is manufactured to the same mathematical standard. The economic result, interchangeable parts. If a steam valve breaks in a mine in Roman Spain, a replacement can be ordered from a foundry in Egypt and it will fit perfectly. This creates a global supply chain 1,800 years ahead of schedule. For the banking revolution, compound interest and risk, the Roman banking system was primitive, mostly limited to simple loans. The innovation, with the discovery of the natural logarithm $, and the variable phase 2 of theory 2, Alexandrian bankers invent actuarial science. The reality, they can mathematically calculate the risk of a shipping voyage or the long-term growth of an investment. The economic result, the birth of the joint stock company. Citizens can invest their sestertii into steam shipping firms, spreading risk and concentrating capital. The empire becomes too big to fail because the wealth of the middle class is tied to the stability of the state. 5. The energy dependency, the coal link. In our world, the barbarians could just walk in and take over a farm. In the Alexandria timeline, the empire runs on energy. The defense, the invaders realize that if they kill the Roman engineers, the pumps stop, the heat goes out, and the food stops arriving by rail. The result, the economic fortress, creates a technological shield. Even the most aggressive tribes are forced to negotiate rather than destroy because they want the benefits of the Roman grid. The final result of the economic fortress, by 400 AD, the empire isn't just a map, it's a machine. It has survived the era of conquest and entered the era of compound growth. Because the economy is built on efficiency, calculus, and power steam rather than plunder, the Dark Ages simply have no place to start. 3. The Plague of Justinian, defeated in our timeline, the 6th century was the beginning of the end. The Plague of Justinian struck in 541 AD, killing an estimated 25 to 50 million people, nearly half of the Mediterranean population. It broke the Roman tax base, emptied the cities, and effectively invited the Dark Ages to begin. In the Alexandria Survives timeline, this isn't a cataclysm, it's a laboratory challenge. 1. The early discovery of the invisible world. Historically, the Romans believed disease was caused by miasma, bad air, or divine punishment. They had no idea that microscopic organisms existed. The tech, by 300 AD, the metallurgy required for high-pressure steam engines, Theory 1, and the lens mathematics from the Archimedes standard, Theory 2, lead to the creation of advanced optics. The reality, Alexandrian metaphysicists use compound lenses to observe the Yersinia pestis bacterium 1,300 years before Leeuwenhoek. They don't call it demons, they call it a biological variable. 2. The infrastructure of hygiene. Fluid dynamics. Roman sewers like the Cloaca Maxima were impressive but relied on simple gravity. They often became stagnant breeding grounds for rats and fleas. The theory using fluid dynamics, phase 4 of Theory 2, engineers realized that water must move at a specific turbulent velocity to remain self-cleaning. The application, steam-powered pumps, Theory 1, create the first pressurized water grid. Every household in Alexandria and Rome has access to boiling water and high-pressure waste disposal. This accidentally destroys the flea and rat populations before the plague can even start. 3. The cordon sanitaire, the mathematical quarantine. In 541 AD, when the plague arrives at the Egyptian port of Pelusium, the empire doesn't panic. They use probability calculus. The strategy, using the stochastic modeling from the intellectual singularity, the library calculates the rate of infection, R0. The result, the emperor orders an immediate steam blockade. Steam-powered ironclads, faster than any wooden ship, intercept all vessels. Because they have the telegraph, Theory 2, the entire empire knows to close its gates within hours, not months. Before the invention of antiseptics, chemical mastery, ancient medicine relied on herbs and hope. But the steam age requires high-level chemistry to treat coal tar and refine fuel. The breakthrough, by 450 AD, Alexandrian chemists realized that the byproducts of coal distillation, phenols, kill the microbeasts they see under their lenses. The result, they developed the first industrial-grade antiseptics. Roman field hospitals begin scrubbing in for surgery. The plague is met not with incense, but with chemical fire and sterilized steel. 5. Demographic continuity, the no-gap history. Because the population doesn't collapse, the chain of knowledge remains unbroken. In our timeline, the plague killed the engineers, the teachers, and the farmers, leading to a lost generation where technology was forgotten. In this timeline, the 6th century is actually a period of growth. While our world was burying its dead, this world was using the labor surplus to build the first transatlantic steamers. The final result of defeating the plague, by 600 AD, the Roman-Egyptian world has survived the greatest biological threat in history. This victory cements the scientific method as the official religion of the state. The Dark Ages are avoided because the people learned that math and medicine were more powerful than the gods. For the intellectual middle class, in our timeline, the fall of Rome led to a knowledge monopoly. Literacy was restricted to the clergy, and the average person became a subsistence farmer who had no use for books. This was the true engine of the Dark Ages, the death of the middle-class intellectual. In the Alexandria Survives timeline, Section 4 explores how the STEAM age and calculus created a social class that made ignorance, and therefore the Dark Ages, economically impossible. 1. The Mechanicus class. In our history, you were either a peasant or a lord. In this timeline, the complexity of steam-powered infrastructure requires a third option, the technician. The theory, a steam-powered grain mill or a rail locomotive cannot be operated by an illiterate laborer. It requires an understanding of pressure, gear ratios, and thermal expansion. The result, the birth of the Mechanicus. This is a massive, well-paid class of citizens who sit between the elite and the poor. They are the guardians of the machines, and their existence ensures that even if the emperor falls, the system keeps running. 2. Literacy as a tool, not a luxury. When books were handwritten, they were icons to be worshipped. When books are mass-produced, Theory 3, Section 1, they become tools. The innovation, the Library of Alexandria publishes operational manuals for every piece of Roman tech. The social shift, a father in 300 AD doesn't teach his son to read so he can study philosophy. He teaches him to read so he can fix the family's steam pump. The result, functional literacy. By 400 AD, the literacy rate in the empire is estimated at 70%. You cannot have a dark age of superstition when the majority of the population can read a blueprint. 3. The secularization of logic in our world. The loss of science led people to look for answers in the supernatural. In this timeline, the middle class is grounded in cause and effect. The intellectual shift, because every child learns the Archimedes standard. Theory 2, they view the world as a series of variables. The result, when a crop fails or a machine breaks, the middle class doesn't look for a curse. They look for a clogged valve or a soil pH imbalance. This pragmatic mindset acts as a psychological firewall against the religious extremism and anti-science movements that historically fueled the Dark Ages. 4. The guilds of science, the first labor unions. As the middle class grows, they organize. These aren't the secretive craft guilds of the Middle Ages, but scientific societies. The strategy, groups of engineers and navigators fund their own local libraries and research centers. The result, knowledge becomes decentralized. Power doesn't just sit in the emperor's palace or the great library. It is held by the people who know how to keep the lights on. This makes society anti-fragile. You can kill the government, but the technological guilds will still be there running the grid. 5. The preservation of the common tongue. The Dark Ages thrived on isolation. Villages became islands because they couldn't speak to each other or the past. The anchor, the intellectual middle class, maintains a standardized version of technical Latin or Common Greek. The result, because they are all reading the same engineering manuals and trade journals, the language doesn't fragment into local dialects. This keeps the global brain of the empire connected. A technician from Roman Britain can move to Roman Egypt and start working on a steam turbine on day 1. The final result of the intellectual middle class, by 700 AD, the Dark Ages are a historical impossibility. Civilization isn't held up by a few geniuses at the top, it is held up by millions of educated citizens at the center. In our world, the light of knowledge was a candle in the wind. In this world, knowledge is a power plant, and the middle class are the people who refuse to let the fire go out, to let society revert to feudalism. 5. The preservation of the sun-centered mind. In our history, the Dark Ages weren't just a loss of technology, they were a loss of perspective. The Earth-centered, geocentric model was more than just bad science, it was a psychological cage that placed humanity at the mercy of the gods and the unknown. In the Alexandria Survives timeline, Section 5 explains how the sun-centered, heliocentric mind became the permanent psychological foundation of humanity. Once you see the universe through the lens of calculus and physics, you can never go back to the dark. 1. The death of geocentric ego. Historically, the Earth-centered model survived because it felt right. To the naked eye, everything revolves around us. The theory with the Archimedes standard. Theory 2. Scholars by 250 AD use parallax and calculus to prove that the Earth is a moving object. The reality, the library makes the heliocentric model the basis of all navigation and timekeeping. The result, the ego of humanity is shattered early. People grow up knowing they are on a moving sphere, v/approx 30/text km/s$ in a vast mechanical system. This creates a society that looks outward toward discovery rather than inward toward dogma. 2. The clockwork universe, the end of superstition. In our timeline, eclipses and comets were seen as omens or warnings from the divine. The innovation using differential equations. Theory 2. Phase 3. The library's astronomers publish The Great Ephemeris, a printed book. Theory 3. Section 1 that predicts every solar eclipse and planetary alignment for the next 500 years. The result, fear is replaced by awe. When an eclipse happens, the Roman citizen doesn't hide in a temple, they take out their calculus tables and verify the math. Superstition cannot survive in a world where the future is a solvable equation. 3. The secularization of truth. Historically, the church became the gatekeeper of knowledge because it controlled the narrative of the heavens. The theory, in the Alexandria timeline, truth is utility. If the sun-centered math allows a ship to cross the ocean or a steam engine to function, that math is true. The reality, science becomes the state philosophy. You don't believe in gravity, you use it to build a bridge. The result, this makes science unshakable. Even if a religious movement rises, it cannot argue with a steam pump that keeps the city's water running. The sun-centered mind is protected by its own success. 4. Optics and the smallness of man. Calculus-based optics didn't just give the Romans telescopes, it gave them microscopes. The breakthrough, by 400 AD, citizens have seen the hidden world of cells and the infinite world of stars. The result, the Dark Age mindset requires a small, controllable world, but the Alexandrian world is infinite. This creates a cultural forward momentum. There is always a smaller particle to find or a farther star to map. The society becomes addicted to discovery, making a retreat into the Dark Ages feel like a death sentence. 5. The preservation of linear time. The Dark Ages often saw time as cyclical. Empires rise, empires fall, and we wait for the end of the world. The calculus view. Calculus is the study of change over time. $. It views time as a vector, a line moving forward. The result, the sun-centered mind views history as a progress bar. Because they can measure their own growth in coal efficiency, mathematical precision, and medical success, they refuse to let the line go backward. They are obsessed with the year 1000, not because they fear the apocalypse, but because they calculate they will have electricity by then. The final result, the unbreakable timeline. By 600 AD, the sun-centered mind has created a civilization that is psychologically modern. They have no dark ages because they have no darkness in their logic. They have no scientific suppression because science is the source of their wealth. They are a Kardashev type 0.7 civilization while our ancestors were just beginning to use heavy plows. The Dark Ages were a 1,000-year blackout. In the Alexandria timeline, the lights never even flickered. The final result, the continuous timeline in our world, history is a broken line. We reached a peak with the Romans, fell into a 1,000-year valley of the Dark Ages, and had to spend the Renaissance climbing back to where we already were. In the Alexandria survives timeline, history is a vertical ascent. This is the continuous timeline, a world where the 2,000-year gap between the steam engine and the space age is compressed into just 3 centuries. 1. The erasure of the Middle Ages. In this timeline, historians don't use the term ancient, medieval, or modern. They view history as a single, unbroken industrial era starting in 100 AD. The reality, by 500 AD, the year our Rome fell, this version of Rome has already transitioned from coal to liquid fuels. The cultural impact, there is no rebirth, renaissance, because nothing ever died. Humanity's collective memory is a straight line of additive data, meaning we reached 21st century technology by 800 AD. 2. The Great Convergence, 1000 AD, while our ancestors were living in wooden huts and fighting with iron swords, the Alexandria-based world of 1000 AD is experiencing its digital revolution. The tech, high-pressure steam turbines drive massive electrical generators. The logarithmic engines, Theory 2, have evolved into electronic vacuum tube computers. The result, the year 1000, is not a time of religious fear, but the year the global wireless network is activated. 3. The galactic transition, 1200 AD. In our timeline, it took 250 years to go from the first steam engine to the moon. In the continuous timeline, with the calculus first, society theory 2, and the economic fortress, theory 3, that jump happens even faster. The milestone, by 1100 AD, humanity has mastered orbital mechanics. The moon landing, in the year 1214 AD, a Roman-Egyptian crew lands on the lunar surface. They don't plant a flag of conquest, they build a research outpost to house a new, larger version of the Library of Alexandria, safe from Earth's atmosphere. Before the biological singularity, without the Dark Ages, medical science never stopped. The mastery, by 1500 AD, this civilization has solved the variable of aging. Using advanced genetics calculated via the same calculus logic used 1,400 years prior, they have extended the human lifespan to 200 years. The result, this solves the generational gap. The same scientists who invented the first computers are still alive to see the first interstellar probes. Knowledge transfer is 100% efficient. 5. Where we are now, the 2026 comparison. In the Alexandria timeline, the year 2026 is not about smartphones or social media. The status, humanity is a Kardashev-type II civilization. We have begun the construction of a Dyson swarm around the sun to harvest its total energy output. The reflection, to a human in this 2026, our version of history where a fire in Egypt set us back a millennium, is the ultimate horror story. It is their version of a post-apocalyptic myth. Final summary, the library as a save point. The Library of Alexandria was more than a building, it was the global save point for the human race. 1. Theory 1, steam, gave us the muscle to build a modern world. 2. Theory 2, calculus, gave us the brain to understand the universe. 3. Theory 3, the continuous timeline, gave us the shield to protect our progress from the dark. Because the library stayed open, humanity didn't just survive, it accelerated. We didn't lose the fire, we used it to reach the stars.